I'm not pissing off the heater because it's 9 degrees. Ready to get this show on the road?
Well, we're gonna wait.
Don't piss off the heater.
Mr. Warm here to be quiet. Any minute now.
Oh, it went up to 10 degrees. It's 10 degrees in New Hampshire. It was -2 when I woke up.
It's a balmy day.
What a great idea. Whose idea was this? This is riveting TV.
Yay!
Here we go.
What are we talking about? Welcome to this episode of Moose and Squirrel Quilters. I am Terry Sancha. I'm the moose.
And I'm Penny Demikis. I'm the squirrel.
And we're in the same place.
We are. I decided to take a flight through the Arctic to the cold New Hampshire weather. And it's currently, it was -2 when I got up
Yes.
today. So, yay. So I'm wearing lots of layers right now.
Yeah.
But what I won't do for this channel and you.
There you go. So today we are going to talk about pressing matters. Important things.
Matters of pressing urgency.
Yes. We're going to talk about how to press for quilting. And
What's not pressing?
Yes. What is pressing?
I think one of the biggest issues that beginners have is pressing, and we were discussing this pressing matter. And as you're teaching beginners, that aside from cutting, making sure your cutting is accurate, and making sure your 1/4 inch seam is accurate, pressing is probably the number one issue.
It's important.
It seems to be. So, and it can make the difference between a bulky quilt and a quilt that doesn't quite lie flat, or that isn't quite square, or any of those things. It can be, if you figure out that your quilt isn't quite the right size, it may very well be the pressing.
Yep, and you can have a nice section of your quilt, and if you don't press it correctly, you can make it not nice anymore. Not so nice. So
those are my favorites. When someone comes to me and says, this quilt block is supposed to be a lot larger and it's way too small, and you go look at it and they've pressed from the back.
Yeah.
And
it folds over. It's like, well, you need to...
Yeah, there's a little gap
open.
there.
Yeah.
There's a little seam there that we might want to address.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing because most people, when they think of ironing, they think of using the iron, they think of ironing, and they think of spraying stuff with water and starch and steam and pushing and moving things across.
Yeah. Or like ironing a shirt. You just do this. Well, that's not what we do in quilting. We're pressing. We're not ironing.
That's right. So what is the difference?
Go ahead. You're the smart one.
Oh, I'm the smart one. That's not what ChatGPT says.
So what is the difference between pressing and ironing?
So ironing is you take a hot iron and you make the wrinkles quit within an inch of their life.
Yes. Yeah.
Like a washboard type. And if I'm going to press wrinkles out of a sheet or out of a piece of fabric even, I'm going to probably spray it, maybe steam it, maybe starch it, and I'm just going to keep pushing things out to get them pressed.
Yep.
Yeah, to get them flat. And in pressing is very much a press down, lift, move, press down. It is not a pushing at all. It's pressing.
Especially if you have biased edges, because if you push, you can stretch your fabric all out of shape.
Yeah, bias can be any kind of triangle, of course, is bias and in some way, shape, or form, and that can pushing on or pulling on that bias can create a real problem. But also so can pressing with water, any kind of steam. So, are you a dry iron presser or
I'm not. I'm
steam
a steamer.
You're a steam presser.
I'm a steamer.
I am a dry iron presser typically. However, I got one of those new reliable irons that has the trigger. Mm-hmm. And so it's really nice having something like that because it's a dry iron and then can actually use steam if you need steam.
Interesting.
But I try really hard not to use steam because I get into trouble with steam.
And I like steam because it makes the fabric do what I want it to do.
Well, you can get out of trouble with steam too if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you know what you're doing.
So what kind of trouble can we get into then?
So here are the most common ones I find is, I don't do this anymore, but when I was a beginner, having that extra little crease, the fold over.
This one right here?
When you press.
That?
Oh, this one's a big one. So when you're,
This right here.
We'll do a little photo of that. But it's, if you're pressing something from the top side and you're not paying attention to which way that seam allowance is going on the back, it can actually twist.
Yep.
Also, it can happen when you're stitching.
Yeah.
If you're locking your seams
And something
flips under the sewing machine, it can create this twist where one edge of the seam is in one direction and one's in the other direction. So you just have this twisted spot, and it's hard then to press that open because it creates this little bump. You kind of have to finagle it. Now, if you ran into something like that, would you take it out?
It depends. Like this simple table runner, this was a sample I made eons ago. I would not, if I was going to finish this.
Yeah.
I would not, just because it's a simple table runner and it's pretty basic. If it was something that was a lot more intricate and it distorted what was going on the front, then yeah I would.
I don't usually take things out unless there's something seriously wrong.
Right.
Like if a seam's really not meeting and it's obvious, all the other seams look pretty and that one doesn't, I might fix it. If it's missized, like in the worst way, I would take that out and be like, I don't know what happened here, but we might need to redo that.
Yeah.
But typically I try really hard not to use a seam ripper, and I try really hard to stitch things in advance when you're teaching, especially.
Yes.
So that you can let students know where the hiccups can be.
Yep.
So that you don't have that problem. But
so
this right here, I would never take that out.
No, I wouldn't take that.
And this is typically what you would do, is that you just leave it in one direction, the other direction, and somewhere in the middle,
you get that bump.
You get a little bump, but you press it out, into like a wool mat.
If it really bothered you, you could make a little cut right there and totally flip it, but I wouldn't even bother.
No, I would leave it.
So, why is pressing important? Pressing can do a couple different things for you. For example, in this piece, we have these 9 patches here, and all the corners match up nicely, and that's because they've been pressed one way or the other way, so you get that nesting seam thing. So if you're following a pattern and it's well written, which we both do well written patterns, it will tell you press it this way or press it that way to make your project go together the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, and I think in a 9 patch you'll typically see it say like press to the dark. And if you're doing something that stands out like this, you can see Terry's 5 part of this 9 patch is dark. So it makes sense. You just always press to the dark. Usually you have one of the colors is lighter and one is darker. And so that's kind of your indication that if there's more blocks that are darker, you would press to that side. But a lot of patterns will actually have a diagram on it and it'll have little arrows, and those little arrows will tell you which way to press. And it's usually, if they've taken the time to put the arrows in there, there's a reason.
Yeah.
There's definitely a reason. When you start getting into triangle points, though, that's where you get tripped up, because in some cases, like if you're sewing together a star, like a Lemoyne star is a good example of that. Sometimes when you go to press following the other rules, you almost have to press in the other direction, because the little point of that flying geese is poking down. So if you try to press out, it's really gonna fold over. Yeah. So in some cases, I've had patterns that you press the point in one direction and the other seams in the other direction. You actually cause that little twist in the back that we were just talking about, and it makes it lay down a little bit.
And you mentioned pressing to the dark. A lot of times when they tell you to press to the dark, now this one is, they're both pretty on the dark side. They're not really light. But if you press, and this was a really light fabric, from the front you can see through and you can see the shadow of what's behind it.
Oh yeah,
so that's
especially
why they tell you to press to the darker fabric.
if your fabrics aren't particularly lined up. Let's say you have
Yeah.
a navy square and a white square, and you don't have them really super lined up. When you go to flip it to the white, you'll actually see a little line
Yeah.
of dark in there,
Yeah.
and it can bother some people. So you have to watch for that. It's also really apparent when it's still a top, because you can see through it really easily. Sometimes when you turn it into a quilt, it kind of goes away, but it can happen. It can happen.
And for garment sewing, they make wider seam allowances and then they trim them back afterwards.
I've never understood that.
I know that's like extra
They do
work.
it in bag
But
construction too.
I can understand that if you have really dark and really light fabric that you're putting next to each other and you grade them so that you cut the darker back so it doesn't show when you flip it over. But
yeah,
that's
I've seen a lot of
for me.
I've seen a lot of TikTok,
Yeah.
bag makers and stuff where they show the instruction and you have the seam allowance and you sew everything just perfect, and then they go back and they trim out the little bits afterwards, and I'm thinking, oh, that's depending on your fabric. If you have a really loosely
that's
woven fabric,
way too much work for me.
When I started quilting, I obviously, I needed to buy less expensive fabric, and I went to Walmart and I would buy a lot of homespun.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know what homespun is, very loosely woven fabric. It's kind of a space between linen and burlap. Somewhere in there.
Closer to the burlap sometimes.
Closer to the burlap. And a lot of times it's plaid, but when you cut it, you can literally see the fibers coming apart. So it's very, very loosely woven. And I would cut these square. I used to make lots of square quilts in, little squares together, different plaid type quilts and rag quilts. I used to make out of homespun, and you'd cut them. And then you go to press them with steam because nobody told me, and I would be pressing them. And then you go to pick them up afterwards. The thing is like literally an inch wider on this corner because I've been pushing and pulling, and the fibers are coming out. And it's like, oh, well, this will be fun cutting afterwards. Which if you're making a rag quilt, you can just kind of make it work. But it's very hard to sew with if you're trying to do something precise.
I made a quilt once that was diamonds, and the diamonds were made up of strips, so everything was biased all over the place.
So fun.
And it was flannel, which is even worse, because that's like homespun is very stretchy. And I sent it to a long armor, and she didn't block it correctly when she put it on the machine. So when I got it home, I had a rhombus?
It's like, one corner is over here, and you go, and it's sad because when you go to cut it, you don't think about it, but when you go to trim it and square it up, you're taking 2 inches off one corner, and then you hold it up, and it's like, what happened to your border there? It's a tilted block. It's
but it's one of my favorite quilts.
We talked a little bit about pressing to the dark, and that's a strong seam when you press from one side to the other. I know we have another subject coming up in another video about pressing seams open, so I don't want to get too into that. We could touch on it because there's times when are you an open seam presser or a closed seam presser, Terry? Tell me about it.
I'm both, actually, depending on the situation.
Me too. And when you talk to a beginner, sometimes they'll say, I took a class and they told me I have to press one side to the other, and I'm really scared to press my seams open. Why would you press your seams open? Do tell.
Sometimes if you have something like you were talking about, a Lemoyne star, where you have a lot of things coming together, it is easier to press them open, and then you can swirl it around and get it to all lay flat. Yeah,
those little, when you press properly with triangle blocks, you can see it on the back. It kind of naturally twists, and it's a fun little. I did a quilt in 2024. I did a temperature quilt on YouTube, and it was all half square triangles. And so it was basically columns of half square triangles that all had to go in the same direction. And so I got into the habit of showing everybody how you press your open triangle, your seams with your triangles open, which reduces the bulk of the point.
Right.
And then you would press, now that I'm putting all the parts together in rows and columns, I'm going to press those seams in one direction for one row and the opposite direction for another row. And that way you can nest those seams. Those little folds kind of go together opposite. And then all of the rows look really nice and neat.
Yes.
And then when you go to press those rows together, I pressed those open because there were so many triangles.
Right.
So it went open seams, then right or left, and then open again.
That's what I did with this. This is a square from a bigger quilt, but these are all pressed to one side, but the middle is pressed open, because when you get this square, this square, this square, this square, and you get that all coming together in the middle, it's nice to have it open and you don't have so much bulk.
Yeah. So after a while, when you're sewing, you get to learn, okay, when these points come together, they're going to be a bit bulky, and you can start figuring out what to press where. But a good pattern designer will tell you, this is the cautionary tale. If you pay attention to those little arrows, it's because eventually when you get this quilt together, you're going to have that center seam and it's going to be super bulky.
Yeah. If you do press open, though, you do need to be careful if you manhandle too much and you start stretching when you're ironing, pressing, you can pull it open. So
would you backstitch? Do you backstitch anything when you're stitching?
Only if it's not going to be crossed by another seam at some point. So not very often.
Yeah, I've had a couple people ask me, especially in a beginner sewing class, because we get into the habit when you're sewing clothing.
Yeah,
if you've learned that way, you backstitch everything because things can come apart. And I have noticed that if you're sewing a lot of rows together, and it's a heavy, especially if it's a heavy quilt, when you go to put the borders on, sometimes the little edges don't catch.
And that depends on the thread too, which that's a whole nother subject.
Yeah, that is a whole...
if I'm using certain kinds of threads, when you get all these ends here, the first couple stitches will pop out like that, if you're too aggressive on it.
Yeah, and then when you go to put the quilt together, you can actually see that the seams have started to come out. So I've noticed that a couple of times on some quilts, especially with, so I have a sewing machine that has a thread cutter, and as you're finishing an end, it actually cuts the thread and it cuts it very, very close to the end. And if you get into the habit of trimming your threads really close to the end when you're taking things off, then that'll happen too. Not that you want to have a bunch of threads on your quilt top afterwards, but trimming your threads a little too close and aggressively pressing.
Yes.
What about wool mats? So do you use wool mat?
Sort of. I don't have a wool mat, but the ironing boards that I use for my retreats and for myself have a cover that has the wool mat built into it.
Oh.
So
that's handy.
So I do use one, but I'm not in a wool mat.
We should put a link to that in the description box. I think we'll put a couple links in the description box for things like the iron that we were talking about with the steam. That one's really popular. I have them at the retreat center, and they're very, very popular. Everybody really loves them. Yeah. So we'll do that. We'll put some links to some of the things that we're talking about so you can see. But I use wool. I've got wool mats all over. And what I've done is, because somebody remarked to me one day that there are people with wool allergies, which I didn't know those humans existed. Right, I thought they all died off. Especially living in New Hampshire, you don't have a wool coat, or wool socks.
No wool socks.
No wool
but
socks.
I do have a wool coat.
Do you have to layer up to keep it from touching you?
I don't have a severe allergy, so I can wear my wool coat, but I could wear wool socks.
Well, I did come across somebody with a wool allergy, so now I know two, that actually said, I can't touch the wool mat. So I went and covered them with like a cotton canvas. So I took all the wool mats and put a cover on top of them so they could be cleaned and everything. But
And that's the ones that I use on my ironing board. They have the cover
already built in.
Built in. So.
I bought these great big ones, and so I covered all of mine. But that's something that what wool bats do is they draw the heat down through the mat, so it actually can pull the seams much flatter.
Yeah.
And this is something I learned recently, because I don't do a lot of embroidery, but I've been doing some research on embroidery. And when you embroider things and you want to press them really nice and flat, and some people get those wrinkles around the outside. And so there's different things about using steam and using certain kinds of threads and everything, that if you don't give your fabric a place to rest when it comes off of the embroidery machine out of the hoop, that it doesn't lay flat. And one of the ladies who was teaching this version said she lays everything on towels, which is the same thing. The towel, it's the same
absorbs
effect.
all the moisture and the heat.
Yeah. So and what towels do is towels flatten out quite a bit, so you have to take them and refluff them and everything. But the wool mat does the same thing. It draws that stuff down into the mat, and so it helps to keep everything nice and flat. So that's one of the tools that we use. That's why they're being sold everywhere.
Yeah.
Wool mats, because that can help, especially if you have like an iron. I don't know if you've used those cordless irons. I have a couple cordless irons, and a lot of students complain they don't get super hot.
Yeah.
And using a wool mat with the cordless iron helps to draw that heat down, so it helps quite a bit.
Another thing to use for flat seams is a clapper, which I couldn't find mine, but it's basically a block of wood.
We'll put a picture up.
I'm still unpacking. I don't know where the stuff is. So when you press your seams while it's still hot, you put the clapper on it, and works very similar to the wool mat. It draws the heat out and the moisture out from the fabric, and it makes it lie flatter. So.
Yeah, and that works a lot with like fleece and stuff. When you're making a fleece jacket or you're sewing with fleece, because you can't always press on that. That we should probably talk about that, about temperatures.
Yeah.
I had a class one time where we used, actually I have two good stories about this. We used a fusible, and I don't know if you know this, but every fusible instruction is different.
Yes.
All the glue is different.
They can't be the same.
Yeah, but when you're picking stuff up and you have to read the
brands,
directions for that.
Directions.
Right. No one reads the directions. But anyway, I had a fusible. I don't use a lot of fusible, but I picked up this fusible project, and I was trying to press it down, and I was using high heat and doing what you do, which is, I'll just keep ironing it. And what happened was I was overheating the glue, and once it overheated, it kind of let go, and it wouldn't attach to the fabric. And so, that's very important. You have to
read the instructions.
And so I read the instructions afterwards, and it's a medium press. You couldn't have your temperature above medium, and it was a 2 to 3 second adhere. Oh. So you set it down, you count to 2, you lift it off, move to the next section, and I just didn't think about it. It was very odd. And then my second great story, which is I have this scrap petal garden quilt, and I was going to make one for spring. This big, huge monstrosity for a spring quilt show. And I started using Steam-A-Seam 2 for the first time. Steam-A-Seam 2 is also a fusible product. Mm-hmm. And I also didn't read the directions. And so the way this quilt works is you press to the fabric, and then you cut all these beautiful petals out, and then you peel the paper off the back and you lay them. Steam-A-Seam 2 is sticky a little bit. So when you pull the paper off of your item that you've cut out, you can stick it to your fabric and you can reposition it. You can peel it off and move it. And so this is like a big exploding flower quilt. So we move petals all over the quilt. So I was moving the petals all over the quilt and then pressing them down when you want them to stay, and then going over to the sewing machine and stitching them. And the petals were coming off. Well, first off, I tried to make a giant quilt the night before the show. That was the first problem. And have it all done. And they were sticking to me. They were coming off and sticking to me. And I'm like, but I pressed them. Well, that particular product, you have to use steam.
Yes.
And who knew? I mean, it says steam is seam. But I didn't. And so it was a nightmare project, but I got it there, and we went through the whole show. And about 6 months later, I was watching another designer, and he's like, here's how you do this, and here's how you do that. And you definitely want to press this with steam. After all, it's in the name. And not only is it in the name, there's a picture of an iron with a steam, cloud of steam coming off of it. Yeah, I'm a designer.
Not a product designer.
I'm not a product user. I'm a collaborative user of masterfully designed products that I don't read the instructions on. But anyway, that's why I'm the squirrel.
Yeah, well,
and you're the moose. So, such a regal animal.
And yet dorky at the same time. And that's me.
And I was just picking up seeds out from underneath the bird feeder.
-2 degree weather.
In -2 degree weather. Probably forgetting where I put the last load of seeds. But anyway, that's very important, is understanding the temperature to iron on. And temperature can mean like the products you're using. It could also be fabric.
Yeah.
So in the case of fleece, because it is a polyester fabric, you have to press it based on the pressing instructions for polyester, which is a much lower heat.
Very low.
So when you put some heat on it, using this clapper gives weight. So you would press the seam and then you'd leave the clapper on, because do we all know that when you lift the iron off, you have to give the fabric time to cool off.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if everybody knows that. And I have the same thing with my hair. You know, you use those curling irons. I have one that has a fan in it, so when I curl it cools it off at the same time, so it kind of sets the curl. And a lot of people don't know that when you press something, fabric has a memory.
Yeah.
And you have to let it set.
One of my things that I love to teach new people is setting seams, which a lot of people will think, oh, that's such a waste of time. But I did do a video on a little experiment you can do to determine whether setting seams really makes a difference. And basically, and we'll put a link to it, but basically you take two pieces of fabric, you run a line of stitching across it, you set the seams on one side but not the other side, let it cool down, and then use your seam ripper and try and pick the stitches out. And on the set side, it will be harder to do, because when you set those seams, your thread and your fabric become closer together. They marry to each other.
Kind of sink together.
Yeah,
almost.
and it's a little bit harder to pick out the side that's been set, and that's why you want to do it. You want your thread and your fabric to marry up and become best buddies.
So when you're sewing to set the seams, you take two pieces and you have the seam.
Yeah.
You're actually laying the seam down on onto the ironing board and pressing
and press it before you
flip it over. Right. That's what I absolutely don't do that.
Get out. Right now. Just leave.
What a waste of time. No. That's probably why some of my seams come apart.
Could be.
Listen, I am sewing 100 miles an hour and clipping with the thing and trying to get it done and get these filmed. And so there are steps that I sometimes skip. But Terry's absolutely right. Setting the seams is a much more professional way to do things. That's why you're the moose.
But don't make me out to be super professional, because I am not.
She knows all the stuff. This is the thing about being an educated quilter, is that you know all the stuff.
Well, what is it? We're both teachers, so what does it say about teachers? Those that can do and those that can't teach?
No, those that don't teach. Do as I say, not as I do.
Yes.
That was a popular phrase.
It wasn't that hard for me to go down and find a top that had mispressed seams in it downstairs. Let's just say that.
I would have brought samples of my own stuff to the great state of New Hampshire, but my suitcase was full of layers. It's very hard to pack for a week in New Hampshire when it's -2.
It's been colder than that, but yeah.
It has been colder than that while we were here, so.
But I didn't make you go on the ice.
You didn't.
Yeah, not yet.
I got off the plane and Terry picked me up and brought me here, and we passed by a frozen lake on the way, and there were dozens of
getting
people
ready for the pond hockey tournament.
Dozens of people with snowblowers on the ice creating hockey rinks, multiple hockey rinks, to do something called pond hockey. And then the following day, hundreds of people standing on the ice. And so I find that to be a little silly and dangerous. And I actually mentioned it to one of my sons, and he goes, "That doesn't sound safe." And that's how I feel about it. But that is not how the locals here feel about it.
We could go to the ice races in an hour and a half.
The ice races. That's where they race cars on the ice, but the people watching the race are also in their cars on the ice. And I pointed out that on the 29th of January, someone's truck fell through the ice already. It's so cold here. But if you haven't had a chance to go to New Hampshire, unlike in North Carolina, where it's also cold, freezing cold right now in North Carolina, because we're having some kind of freak storm, but there's nothing to do in North Carolina during a freak storm. We all stay inside.
Oh no,
but out here, if you've ever wanted to have fun, like outside, this is the place to do it.
Yeah, we have lots of stuff to do outside.
Oh, I also read this morning that a New Hampshire ski resort, one of their ski lifts got stuck.
Yeah, I saw that.
And they had to rescue like 59 people off the ski lift. No one died. They were great, but it was very cold on the ski lift. But that's the first time in my 53 years that I can recall that ever happening.
Oh, I've gotten stuck before.
I've never heard about it. Well, I mean, you've been stopped, but I've never needed to be rescued. I've never heard of anyone needing to be rescued on a ski lift.
We had to be rescued from a roller coaster in Disneyland.
That sounds more dangerous.
It was in the dark section, so you're sitting in there in the dark. Then finally,
like Magic Mountain?
It was on the Matterhorn. And so then all of a sudden this guy comes out and you hear this voice, "Follow me." Really?
It's through the dark.
Yeah.
I was on a ride in Disneyland one time where it got stuck. They turned the lights on, and the magic was gone.
Oh, yeah, no.
It was the unmagic kingdom that day.
They never turned the lights on, so we're in the dark.
It was Magic Mountain where they have all those lights and everything, and they turned all the lights on, and it's not as pretty.
No.
When they turn the lights on, so it's like, where'd all the magic go? Do you have any other? Do you want to show them your pretty irons that you got?
So, if ironing and pressing, you think of it as a chore, let me just show you some old irons so that you can appreciate our modern irons. So, I know many of you know what this is. It's usually referred to as a sad iron. They weigh 149 pounds, and we use them as bookends or door stops nowadays. Oh my God. This is one of my favorites. This is a coal iron. So this one, you would open this up and you would put hot coals in here, and then you close it up and then you iron with it. Now, this weighs a lot on its own. It's also got these big holes in here all over. So I would imagine that little embers are coming out while you're trying to iron whatever.
Can you imagine ironing sheets with that?
And then just a little embers coming out.
Just embers come out and you're like, oh! And you guys are worried when you go to a quilt store and find a tiny little scrub mark on a piece of white, and they're ironing with actual fire.
And then these two, these are little small ones, and when people see these, they quite often think of them as toys. Hang on. Oh. And while I would imagine that children did play with them, they do serve a purpose. So this one, you pull this button up. This part you would put on the stove and the wood stove and get hot, and then it has a little clamp, and then off you go.
Play with it.
This one, you pull this up in the middle. This comes off. You put this on the stove, and then you're ready to go. And these would be used to do like ruffles or any of the fine little fussy. They have very pointy points, so you get into the little nooks and crannies, and so they did serve a purpose.
This one's really cool because it's flat here,
Yeah,
but it
and it's
curves up
curved,
on this
yeah.
side, so you could probably do like clothing and stuff.
Yep, yeah,
With
to
that.
get into the little creasy.
And go over like
Spots,
a ham.
yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
tell them what a ham.
Oh, so usually more for garment sewers. Now this one's an ancient one, but this garment sewers use hams. This is a really big, long one. They make little short, little short ones like this that are very rounded on the top. And if you want to get into pressing your seams open, they are very handy for that because it helps you keep it open as you're going. But this is a padded surface, and then you just iron right over the top of this.
I have one that's round. It actually looks like a ham. It's round, and it looks like a little pillow. And I have one that's like a fat one, and I have one that's about like this.
Right.
For doing like inside sleeves and stuff.
This one.
I don't iron any clothes, but
No.
I have it.
Yeah.
So.
This one's ancient. I have used this one to press like long seams open.
Yeah.
Because it's got such a large amount of real estate on here.
It would also, I think, it would work really good for binding because it's really long.
Yeah.
If you wanted to work in a small space and do bindings, but I have used my ham for pressing bags.
Yep.
The curves of bags. I've stuffed it down in there. Sometimes when you are using that foam, a foam fabric inside of a bag to get it to stand up and have body. It's just so bulky.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's nice to put something up in there and get it. So I use it kind of like a, they have those little glove mitts you put inside your hand and it has like an ironing pad on it. Have you ever seen those?
Iron on your hand?
You do. It's a Clover product, actually. It was Lazy Girl. Joan Hawley did that. It's a glove. You put it on and it's got a padded, it's almost like a pot holder kind of. And you put your hand inside and you can iron.
I don't think so. Not for me.
Yeah, you can do that. Oh, I have a story one time. Somebody, it was a relative. I'm not going to name who it was. But she came in the house one day and she had like a little mark on her face. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened to you? And she goes, well, you know how sometimes when you're waiting for an iron to heat up and you touch it to your face to see if it's hot?
No.
That's the face I gave. I was like, you do that? Like I, licked your finger and I've never put it on my face. She's like, yeah, I touched it. It was really hot. I was like,
Okay.
oh my God. I have a great family.
Well, this one I actually found in a thrift store and it was quite ugly. I recovered.
Yeah, it's got
put new batting and put a batik on here because a batik has tighter weave. So, and you can tell this one's old because it's quite heavy for its size because the old wood is heavy. So
it's really, really nice.
but
So yeah, we can find all kinds of fun stuff at an antique store. Have you ever used like those little irons for just pattern weights or something like that? You could
you could do that
decoratively use them in your studio. If you like to collect things like that, you can use these as a decoration in your studio.
I do a presentation for guilds and groups about old stuff, so this is why it's all part of my
It's super beautiful. Because you do speaking engagements, as do I. Mm-hmm. So if you belong to a guild,
absolutely,
and you would we do both Zoom and in-person things. Terry's in the New England area, so definitely if you want in-person in New England, that's where you want to call. And I'm in...
But I'll go anywhere.
Yeah, I also do. We do travel into other places, but I'm in North Carolina. And so we do in-person speaking engagements. Also, you have purplemoose.com. is your website. I am at cabinquilters.com. I'm also
PurpleMooseDesigns.com.
Purple Moose Designs. Sorry. Yeah, purplemoosedesigns.com. That's also your...
If you go to purplemoose.com, it takes you to a bar.
Don't go there. Well, I mean, you could go there.
You could go there,
you
but
could
you
go
won't
there,
find
but you
quilting
won't find
stuff.
fabric. Yes, and then YouTube. What are you on YouTube?
Purple Moose Designs.
Perfect.
On
And I am
YouTube.
Cabin Quilters on YouTube. And then what we'll do is we'll put in the description box, because I have a couple of great pressing videos. Terry has great pressing videos, so we'll put some links to some of our pressing videos in the description box for you to see, and some of the tools that we talked about, like a clapper, and we didn't talk about the wood iron either.
Oh.
So, but there are other little ways, like if you're at your sewing machine and you need something's just not quite right, you can use they have little pressing wheels.
Some people use like their fingernail. Well, if you don't have fingernails or you don't want to wreck your fingernails, they have wood irons and
which is just a piece of wood with
has
a
an
little
angled
kind of an
piece.
angled cut on it that you can run along the iron, so you can do that. I don't rely on that, but I have used it. So
I like mine. I use mine a lot.
yeah, if you're doing little tiny parts and you just want to keep from getting up, you do want to get up out of your chair on occasion, but if you want to go from part to part, you can, it's an easy little thing you can use for a pressing wheel or wood iron or something like that. Works really well. So, well, if you have any other questions about ironing or pressing
matter,
or any other topics that you would like us to cover, definitely
leave it in the comments.
leave it in a comment. Also in the comments, what about your pressing horror stories?
Yeah,
I want to hear about that.
We want to hear that.
We want to hear all about you and what you do and all that. So leave us a comment because we like that, and we'll share it on the next episode. Until next time.
We'll see you later.
Yeah, we'll see you later.
Oh,
See you.
hit like and subscribe so
Like and subscribe.
so you'll know about next
Listen,
time.
it wouldn't be a YouTube video if someone wasn't asking you to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. So we got to do that. Otherwise, we're not professionals.
They'll kick us out of YouTube.
They will kick us out of YouTube. Right off the algorithm completely. All right, we'll see you next time.
Ya.